Hey everybody, in this video I'm here to talk to you about technical writing. I know it's a super thrilling subject and you're probably sitting there wondering what does this have to do with woodworking, but here in Applied Skills we're all about teaching you practical skills. And believe it or not, technical writing, or how to write a step-by-step, is actually something that's incredibly important. Lots of people in the grown-up world actually do this for a job, and it pays pretty decently. So I'm going to show you how to do this. So technical writing is all about being short and to the point. And its main job is to tell someone how to actually do something. And if you think about getting someone to be able to do something, you're probably going to do it in a sequence with a bunch of steps. Now you want to keep it short and simple, no more than 2 sentences per step. Each step should also involve only one task. Any more than that, and you're going to start to confuse your reader. Now, in each step, it's jam-packed with useful information. Every single step has an action word or a verb. It also tells you the tool or object that you're supposed to be interacting with. And also, steps will either give you specific quantities so that you know how much you're dealing with, or some quality to tell you that you've done it right. So one common form of step-by-steps that you might be familiar with are actually in recipes. So let's look at one together. As you notice, it's broken down into steps, starting with the very first step at the top and the last step at the bottom. You can also sort of see that each step is usually no longer than 1 sentence. Finally, they all involve just one task. Once you're done the first task, you move on to the second task. Now, if you look at all these steps, you'll also see that each step has an action word or a verb. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight all of the verbs. As you can see, preheat, beat, stir, dissolve, drop, and bake, these are all things that you do. And as we look back, each step also has a tool or an object that you're supposed to interact with. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight all of the tools and objects that you interact with in red. And now, as you can see, I've gone and highlighted all of the objects and tools that you're supposed to interact with in red. For example, we know that we're supposed to stir something. What do we stir? We stir the vanilla. We know that we're supposed to preheat something. What are we supposed to preheat? It's the oven. Finally, each step has some specific quantity or some quality to tell you that you've done it right. So this is a bit trickier. So I'm going to start by highlighting all the quantities in green, and then we'll highlight all the qualities in yellow. So here we go back to our recipe, and we'll take a look at our quantities. And as you can see, all the quantities are green. So for example, and these quantities are crucial. For example, when we're preheating our oven, it's really important to know how hot the oven should be. Same thing with vanilla, right? When we're supposed to stir it, okay, we know we're stirring vanilla, but how much vanilla are we supposed to stir? Now, as you noticed, cups and teaspoons and degrees are usually things that are associated with cooking. In woodworking, these specific quantities might be things like length, width, and thickness, dimensions of the piece of wood itself. And as I mentioned before, steps either have a specific quantity to tell you that you've done it right, or some sort of quality. So this isn't measurable, it's observable. For example, we know that we're supposed to beat the butter, the white sugar, and the brown sugar together, but like, when do we stop? Well, we know we should stop when it's smooth. We know that we could be baking it for 10 minutes in the preheated oven, or until edges are nicely brown. So now that I've shown you an example of technical writing, I'm going to go and write one right now. So below is a gumball machine ramp that you might have made in grade 8. And so this is going to be an instruction on how to make a gumball machine ramp. All right, so here's my example. I'm going to start writing. So my first step would be grab a piece of wood from Mr. Al. Now I recognize this isn't going to be perfect, but I'm just trying to get all my thoughts onto the page, and I'll go back and I'll proofread it later. Next, I'm going to drill a hole on the top of the piece of wood. The hole should be in the middle of the ramp. Okay, next, I'm going to think about making this curvy thing over here. And so I'm probably going to use the spindle sander for that. So on the spindle sander, make the ramp. Oops, make the curve on the ramp. I know with confidence from step 1 to step 5, I will have gotten from a square piece of wood into something that kind of looks like this. Now it's time to proofread to make sure that all my steps are actually helpful to someone who's actually reading this for the first time. So to do that, I'm going to go back and pull up my checklist. So I've pulled out my checklist down here, and I'm going to make sure that I have a verb in all of my sentences. Okay, so grab a piece of wood, yep, that's a verb. Drill a hole, that's a verb. Make the curve, that is a verb, but I could make it more specific. The spindle sander sands the curve. So I'll just say, on the spindle sander, sand the curve. On the ramp, using 80 grit sandpaper, sand the faces, okay, and sand the faces and edges. Perfect. I also realized I have a typo here. I didn't write until, so I'll write until there. All right, so check. I have all the verbs and actions. Next, I'm looking for the tools that I'm supposed to interact with, okay? So there's not much of a tool here, or the object I'm supposed to interact with is the piece of wood that I'm grabbing. Okay, drill a hole on the top of the piece of wood. The hole should be in the middle of the ramp. Okay, so I'm actually missing the tool here. It might be obvious for me that you would use the drill press, but it may not be obvious for a new grade 8 student. So I'm going to write on the drill press, drill a hole in the top of the piece of wood, and the hole should be in the middle of the ramp. Perfect. Okay, I indicated what tool I should use to sand the curve. That's the spindle sander. I told them what kind of sandpaper I need to use. Check and check. All right, this is the trickiest part. There should probably be some sort of specific quantity or quality to tell me that I've done it right. Okay, so first one, grab a piece of wood for Mr. Rao. Now this is going to be a bit of a challenge because wood comes in all shapes and sizes, so I could be a bit more specific. So grab a piece of wood from Mr. Ow that is 1 inch thick, 3 inches long, and 1 inch wide. That's a bit more specific, and it helps the student not go and look for an 8-foot 2x4 and bring that to me. All right. Let's look at the next sentence. Drill a hole on the top of the piece of wood, and the hole should be in the middle of the ramp. Okay, so there's an indicator for the student that they've done it right. The hole's on the top of the piece of wood, and the hole is somewhere in the middle. I'm using yellow because it's more of a quality. All right, moving on. On the spindle sander, sand the curve on the ramp. It could be more specific. Sand the curve on the top of the ramp, because what I'm afraid is some student is going to misinterpret that and go this way. Now, I'm going to need a way to tell the students that they're going to need to sand all the way halfway through the thickness. So I'm trying to figure out a good way to describe that. Maybe the curve should be so large that there is no more than 5 millimeters of flat surface on both ends. All right. Now I'm not loving it. This isn't the most clear. And honestly, to make this better, I would probably draw a picture or give them some sort of a diagram so they could look at an example of what is good and what is bad. But for the purposes of this assignment, I don't want you drawing pictures. I just want you to write stuff. So this will be good enough for now. All right, and then if we look over here for step 4, using 80 grit sandpaper, sand the faces and edges until smooth. So yes, that does tell the student when they should stop sanding until it's smooth. And it's more of a visual quality than it is a quantity, but that's still good. I'm actually going to be more specific. Until splinters and pencil marks are gone. I like that better. All right. Finally, using 220 grit sandpaper, sand the faces and edges until smooth. So again, until smooth tells the student when they should stop sanding. And there you go. This is an example of a step-by-step on making that ramp. You can also see the value of just brain dumping all your thoughts onto the page and going back later to add those things in. So that's how I do it. Happy technical writing. And now it's your turn to practice.